last weekend I can get out of them that I've managed to get. Good morning, everybody that's joined us so far. We will be beginning the session shortly. We're just going to wait for a few more people to join us. But in the meantime, if you want to be making an introduction of yourselves in the chat box, just say who you are, what you do and where you come from. That would be great because it helps us who are delivering the session understand who we've got in the room with us. And then it also gives you an opportunity to connect with each other as well. So please do be making an introduction of yourselves in the chat box while we're waiting for a few more to join. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everybody. I think we are likely going to have a few more people joining us, but we're a couple of minutes past 10 o'clock now, and we've got an awful lot to cram into today. So I think we'll make a start. Do please continue to introduce yourselves in the chat box. As I said earlier, it's a great opportunity for us to see who we've got joining us today, but also for you to make some informal connections. Think of this as the new virtual way of sort of standing around having coffee and a slice of cake if we were back in pre-2020 and doing this in a hotel somewhere. Okay, so I'm going to kick off. Welcome, everybody. This is the second session that we are running in a series of 4 core learning events to support the delivery of the UEC recovery plan through the Universal Support Offer. My name's Lisa Hume. I am a member of ESIST and I will be hosting your session today. Just to let everybody know that the session is being recorded. And there will be a copy made available to access following the event. Now, for those of you that were here for core learning event last week, we know that there's been some issues with accessing the video. So we are just in the process of building a futures platform where we're going to hold all of the resources from all 4 of these core learning events. As soon as that is up and ready and live, we will be emailing out to you all through the UEC Champions generic inbox to let you know that that is available and with the link of how to access it. So do bear with us. We've just had a few technical issues in the background that we've had to deal with around that, but you will have access to the recording today. So if for any reason you do have to drop off, or there are elements that you want to watch back, or indeed you've got colleagues who are away on leave and not able to join this week, it's not a problem because we'll have the recording and the transcription available after the event. We would just like to make some suggestions so that you get your best out of your learning today. Absolutely appreciating that you are all very busy people, but if you are able to do so, switch off your phone, or if not, maybe put it on silent. Close down your Outlook browser so that you haven't got your notifications popping in for your email. And if you're in a room somewhere where you're likely to be disturbed, maybe think about popping a do not disturb sign up on the door. Absolutely appreciate that none of those may be possible, but if you can think about doing that, that will just help give you an environment where you can absorb the learning slightly more effectively today. Okay, so moving on then, we've just set a few ground rules there. I'm not going to go through them all. You can read them at your leisure. But the main thing is just be kind today. We noticed last week that there was some comments that were made, and actually we learned from those comments around understanding that people learn differently, people have different learning styles, and you know, one style doesn't fit all. So just an encouragement really just to be kind to each other and appreciate that we're all coming from different backgrounds and different perspectives. So moving on to what today's session we'll be touching on. So we're going to be covering today leadership behaviours. We're going to go through something called the STAR model. There's a section on emotional intelligence, and then a whole section on the sustainability tool and how you might use it to keep your improvement work on track as you embark on this journey. Do remember, though, that this is a very short session and it is only covering the basics. So there will be a number of links that we recommend throughout the presentation today that will help you to develop your learning further. We're not going to be putting links in the chat. So what we're going to do is, again, as part of all the resources that we are going to be sharing and putting up onto the futures page, you will get access to that. Can I just check, somebody's popping the hand up. Did you have a burning question? Or you're just sussing out how things work at the top of the screen?
I think it's gone down now, Lisa.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. I was just checking, I could see a little yellow hand just kept popping up in front of me, so I just wanted to do a double check. So yeah, it is. We know that what we're delivering today is very much sort of basic foundation level. It's aimed at people who've maybe just embarking on improvement science and methodology for the first time, or indeed just want a bit of a refresher. But we will be providing links of where you can go and develop your knowledge further and access other resources as we go through. Okay, so we've got a great opening to today's session. I would just like to introduce a gentleman called Dr. Robert Thirsk, who is a Canadian astronaut and a surgical doctor and a friend of ESIST. And I hope that Kate doesn't mind sharing. Kate, one of my colleagues that's on with us today and supporting in the background, is actually related to Dr. Robert Thirsk. Dr. Thirst undertook his first space mission in 1996, and he was the first Canadian to go to the International Space Station. And you might ask yourself, why on earth have we got an astronaut opening today's session, Lisa? Well, he's joining us today to share his thoughts on leadership and how the principles can apply to any setting. So, if you think about the pressurized environment that astronauts will be working within, and then compare that to the pressurized environment that we in the NHS have to deal with, there will be some strong similarities. And Dr. Thirsk is sharing his thoughts on leadership and how those principles can be applied. I think a special quote that Robert states is, "Dream audacious dreams, and the sky will not be your limit," which I think is great advice for all of those that are about to embark on our own adventurous improvement journeys as part of this programme of work. So let's hear from the man himself. Kate, if you could press play, please. Very inspirational opening address. I hope you would agree, and a great way to kick off the session today. I just do want to just pick up if anybody is having any sound issues. We have just done a sense check with colleagues. We know that most people can hear, so it could be a Wi-Fi issue. It could also be that you need to go into your settings and make sure that you've got your settings set up so that you've got sound coming through. So audio through your laptop or through your PC. So just try that if you are struggling, because we have got quite a bit of the session that is on recorded video today. Okay, so we're now going to move on to a pre-recorded session that we've got from a colleague, Dr. Lee Dowson. Dr. Dowson is the Associate Medical Director for Quality Improvement at the Royal Wolverhampton NHS Trust. He's also a consultant respiratory and acute physician, and he is a clinical associate with ESIST. So a very busy man indeed. His session today is going to cover the key principles of leadership for improvement. And we hope you enjoy this session. So if you could press play, Kate, and we'll start the recording. Thank you. Okay, so just a little pause moment there. So while everybody's just having a think about that advice you'd go back and give to your former self, please do pop it in the chat because I'll be coming over to Angela shortly just to gain some thoughts and see what advice you would give. I've thought about this and reflected on what advice would I give myself if I was to go back a few years ago. And I've got quite a number of years of operational management experience. And many, many, many years ago, I used to get really annoyed at other people who, in my mind, I perceived as not listening and not doing what I wanted them to do. And at the time, I'd just get really frustrated about it. So, my advice back to my former self would be very much about understanding other people and where they're coming from, rather than expecting that everybody is in my world, recognizing that we're all in our own world. We've all got our own pressures to deal with, whether they be work or home related, and actually understanding that most of the time when I perceive people to being awkward, they weren't necessarily being awkward. They were actually dealing with a whole set of pressures that I wasn't aware of. So that's probably advice that I would give if I was able to go back so many years back in my career and offer myself some advice. So let's see if we've got anything coming through in the chat. Anything coming through, Angela?
Just different, I think, different approaches. Janina said it's really useful to appreciate individual skill sets. So I think I think that's really important. And I think reflecting on my own personal self as well, I remember, and I hold my head in my hands as a very newly in position, very junior leader, saying to somebody, and I can't believe I said this. Do you know who you're talking to? And I've never forgotten that. And the look on her face and the fact that it can take a lifetime to build a reputation and it can take an instant to lose it. And in that moment, I lost all trust and all credibility. And so I think for me, the biggest thing is being humble. And some people would see that as being as a weakness, but actually, I think by being humble and appreciating that I don't know everything and that it's okay to ask for help and it's okay to not know. I think that's probably been one of the biggest tools in my toolboxes because somebody out there will know. And by forming alliances, I think is the best way with leadership. And often it's with the most unlikely people as well. So I
Yeah,
think it's knowing your network.
yeah.
We've had a couple of other bits in the chat room now. Thank you for your comments. So understanding barriers to improvement and then the values of team contributions. And again, Richard talking about different skills and strengths and understanding those. Having clear communication, Lisa said, remain sighted on developments, challenges and successes. Listen to the team, they have the answers. Absolutely, Adele. I think that's really important. And then give the team time as well to involve them an opportunity to be able to contribute to ideas. I think sometimes some of the worst leaders I've ever worked for, I'm sure you agree, Lisa, is that the ones that go off gung-ho and say, right, this is what we're doing, and they take nobody with them. And you could be the best leader in the world, but if you haven't got a team around you, it's like being an army in battle, isn't it? So
Absolutely.
to be an incomplete leader is a strength. We need to use our colleagues to become a team. Yeah, absolutely, Sharon. So yeah,
Fantastic.
lots of
Okay.
people agreeing with comments as well. So that's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Angela. Yeah, and great to see some common themes coming through there. So, yeah, just it's probably a really good point to just ponder on as you're about to embark on your improvement work over these next few weeks. Really, sort of, kind of think about when you've been on the receiving end of not great leadership and learn how not to do it and do it differently with the people that you're going to be working with. Okay, that's really helpful. Keep those coming because I think they're all really useful for colleagues that are on the call today to be able to see your own insights as well. So do keep them coming in the chat there. And Kate, if you wouldn't mind pressing play, we'll continue with the recording. Thank you.
And the second, might not work a little bit at the beginning.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Kate. Okay, right. So what we're going to do, guys, if you do have any questions, could I ask you to pop them into the chat box? As you will realise, Lee is not here and live with us today. So what we are going to do, again, as part of the resource pack that you'll have available to you post the event, is any questions, if you've got any specific questions on what Lee has presented around any of the models or any of the further learning stuff that you can access, pop it in the chat, and then we're going to create a Q&A document after the event so that we get Lee or other members of the team to put the answers in, and then we're going to send that out to everybody. So as you'll know, we've got colleagues from the North regions here today. We rerun this session another 3 times over the course of this week so that colleagues from other regions can join and participate in their local event too. So we're going to put all of those questions and answers together, put it into one big document and share that with everybody after the event. So if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the chat and we'll pick those up through the transcript after today. So in true continuous improvement style, we listened to some feedback from last week's session around 2 hours being quite a long time to be focused on the screen. So we're going to give you a bit longer break today. So we're just going to stop here now and have a 10-minute break. And within that break, you can do whatever makes you feel most comfortable. So if you need a comfort break or you need to go and get a drink, please do so. If you want to take that 10 minutes just to reflect on what you've heard so far today, make yourself some notes, please do, whatever works best for you. I'm going to ask if people could be back promptly at 11:05, please, and then we'll kick off with the next section of the event today. So quick 10 minutes, back at 11:05. We'll see you all then. Thank you. Okay, so I make that 5 past, so we'll kick off again. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you're all feeling refreshed and ready for the second part of today's session. The next section today is all about the sustainability tool and how you might want to use it in supporting keeping your improvement work on track. Now, some of you may have used the sustainability tool before, so please use this as a refresher if you have. But for those of you that haven't used it before, Claire's going to take us through what it is, how you might use it, how you might use it to keep everything on track as you go. And again, just reminding people, I know we're throwing a lot of information at people in a very short space of time here, but in terms of resources, you'll have access to the slide pack, you'll have access to a document with all the links in for all the other resources that we've referred to today, the video recording, and if there's anything else you need, please do just reach out and we'll make sure that we include that in the resources. So I'd like to welcome Claire Powell, who's part of our Southwest regional team. She supports colleagues across systems to use quality improvement methodology as a way of thinking about how to make changes which will result in the most positive impacts. Claire is particularly focused on using QI tools and techniques to help ensure patients and those working within health and care are involved throughout. So without further ado, over to you, Claire.
Thanks very much, Lisa. Hi, everyone. So as Lisa mentioned, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about sustainability today, particularly the sustainability model as a tool to support you, and really thinking about your role as leaders and having that oversight and driving those changes and those improvements and what might help you enable that. So this is something that you can think about from the perspective of, very small scale changes or much wider projects or programs of work as well. So it's really possible to scale sustainability. But to start off with, what I'd like to ask of you is actually, what does sustainability mean to you? So what do you think about when you hear the word sustainability? And we're going to gather your thoughts via Menti. So over to Sarwar to help with that.
Thanks, Sarwar. Okay, so Sarwar will be popping the link to the Menti in the chat box as well, because I know it was a very quick flash up on the screen there. So we'll pop it in the chat. So for anybody that hasn't logged in yet, you'll have the QR code and the access code if you are going through the old-fashioned way using menti.com. And so if you just move it on and then pop it into the chat box, that'd be great. Okay, we've lost it off screen, Sarwar, if you wouldn't mind screen sharing again.
Thought we lost Sarwar for a minute there as well. I'm so glad you're still there.
Perfect, great. So we've got some responses coming through here. So what have we got? Maintaining appropriate levels of delivering green strategists means to one person, able to continue to deliver the care standards, making sure the change is embedded, ability to look long term, it's a good one. Ability to be able to replicate time and time again. So I think we probably have all been on the receiving end of initiative-itis, and we kind of get like magpies, don't we? We do something until the new shiny thing comes along, and then we're like, oh, new shiny thing over here, let's go and do that instead. So yeah, I've got other comments here, Claire, on consistency, long lasting and achievable, ensuring that the improvement stays, repeatability. So very common themes and threads coming through there.
Absolutely. Yeah, and interesting that there's some different elements people picking up about the environmental impact, as well as that longevity and that replicability as well. So interesting those themes are coming through. Can we scroll down as well?
Yeah, if you
There's
just
some more further
press
down.
return, Sawa should scroll down.
I really like the comments about the fact that the team have bought into it, you know, that real ownership, which is something that really relates to culture change and behaviour change, which Lee also talked about earlier in the presentation today.
It may look like we've got some technical issues, Claire, so I think if we close that down and move back to the presentation, that would be helpful. So if you stop screen sharing, Sawa, Kate will
Thanks, Sawa.
put them back up. Kate will resume at your correct slide, Claire.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Kate. Okay, so we obviously had a few different thoughts there in terms of perspectives, and to be clear in terms of for this short session today, I'm just going to be focusing on the fundamental transformation in terms of sustainability as opposed to the environmental impacts. So just to be clear on what this short session is today, but what I will do is share with the ESIS team a link to Sustainability QI, which is where if you want to think about environmental initiatives and environmental sustainability as part of your quality improvement programmes of work, then you can do that as you go through. And there is a particular initiative that will help you think about ways to do that as part of embedding it within your improvement methodology. So we'll share those. So here are a couple of perspectives as well from others in terms of thinking about sustainability, and I'll leave you to read those for a second. I really like the second one, so thinking about the attitudes and the thinking, so behaviours behind process and outcome changes. And for me, that really relates to this discovery model, which Lee mentioned earlier. So whilst we actually might on the surface be looking at changed processes and changed outcomes and outputs.
Sorry,
Hi.
Claire, if I can just join in. I think we've got a technical issue. Kate, could you just stop screen sharing and then go back in and resume? Because we're just seeing a blank screen at the moment. Please. Thank you. Okay, and if you could take us through, that's brilliant. We're there now, Kate. Perfect. Thank you, Claire.
No problem at all. That's great. So yeah, just thinking about the second quote there around thinking attitudes behind the process and outcomes being changed, then I really like that one because it relates to the discovery model. So really recognising that if we've got embedded change, then we're looking at behaviours that have altered fundamentally behind actually seeing on the surface people's approaches and work processes and tasks may have changed, but actually if we've got those behaviours kind of behind them and understanding why we've actually made a change, that's really important, and that fits in with the discovery model that Lee talked about earlier. So, as I said, I want to talk to you particularly about the sustainability model and focus on this because I think this is really helpful for yourselves as leaders to be able to have that kind of higher, wider view in terms of in taking a change forward and thinking about what are the factors that need to make it successful. So, given the fact that this is a model and the fact that it's got scoring behind it, it might be that you use it as part of some of your project group discussions, your programme discussions, your board discussions to actually understand what are the areas that are working really well in terms of embedding a change and what are the areas potentially that you have that you need to work on. So this sustainability model is very much NHS developed and created. Some of the other models that we hear about in terms of improvement science are from manufacturing industry or from elsewhere outside of healthcare. And whilst being absolutely applicable to healthcare, this is one that was developed within healthcare. So a number of years ago now, there was a bringing together of 250 experts, project leaders, change leaders across NHS England who were brought together literally in one room. So you can imagine how much kind of involvement that took to actually sit down and run through just over 100 different factors that were considered as being important to sustain change. And out of those 100 factors, then the group actually refined them down to these 10. So we've got 3 themes here in terms of staff, process and organisation, and those are split out into 10 individual factors. And the group felt from their experience that these ones were the ones that were most important to ensure that these were in place to make sure that a change was sustained and successful. They are weighted, and we'll see that from the kind of scoring as I run you through the model. But they are weighted, and unsurprisingly, they are weighted in favour of staff or people being the most important theme that makes a difference as to whether a change is successfully embedded or not. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody, and I think Lee referred to earlier as improvement being very much a team sport. So going through then out of these kind of 10 factors, each factor has a table and a matrix associated with it. In a little bit, we're going to ask you to have a look at this yourself. So we will post the link in the chat at that point to the sustainability model, and you'll see the full model all in one place. So at the moment, I'm just going to take you through an example. So this is an example of one of the process factors. So there are 4 process factors, and the adaptability of improved process is one of those. So on the left-hand side, you can see that there's a factor description. So what are the elements that you need to think about within adaptability of the improved process? And then on the right-hand side, you've got 4 statements. So this is not dissimilar to those kind of lots of multiple choice questions and answers that we've got as we come across in part of our kind of day-to-day or psychometric testing, anything along those lines. But what you can do then for each of the kind of factors is think about whether it is statement A that best suits your situation, statement B, C or D. And they go from most adaptable in terms of this example, statement A. So the improved process can adapt to link in with and even support other organisational changes. So it's got that wider link in. It wouldn't be disrupted if specific people left the project. So there isn't a kind of keystone person that's helping this change kind of embed. Actually, it is very much part of the behaviours and the approach of the wider team or group. And its focus will continue to meet the improvement needs of the organisation. So very much thinking about the adaptability being future-proofed already. So when you're thinking about your change, think about which of those statements does it meet in relation to the adaptability of the process, and then put a tick next to those. So you've got, as I say, 10 of these little tables, and you work through each of them. And it's very much a case of thinking quite kind of lightly about it, so that you can then focus on the scoring and then the so what, what are we going to do as a result of looking at this model. So in the booklet, you will also see that there is what's called a master scoring system, and like a number of kind of magazine little kind of scoring systems and little quizzes that people might have taken in their kind of teen years, then there is a master scoring system that's similar to that. So for each of the factors, you take your answer, A, B, C or D, whichever statement you feel fits best, and you transfer that into numerical score. I'll explain the differences for the numerical scores in a minute. So at the top here, for the factor of benefits beyond helping patients, it might be that you've chosen statement C. So statement C best fits your particular change project. And so that C relates to a numerical score of 4.0, and then you write 4.0 in that circle there. And you do that for each of the factors. And as I say, you'll see it in the booklet. So the different scores here actually relate to the different ranges of scores you can have for each of the factors. So here you can see, and you don't need to look at the detail of it at this point, but at any point, if you do want to zoom in, please remember that you can use your control button and then your mouse rollerball to be able to zoom in and out if you want to be able to read any of this a little bit more. But what this shows you, this chart shows you, is not the scores that you have worked through as part of the process of looking at each of the statements, but the maximum scores that you can have for each of your factors. So what we have here is the 3 different groups of factors, 3 different themes, and you can see here that the longest bars are relating to the people factors. So those are the most highly weighted factors. So those are the areas that if you focus on anything, they are the areas to focus on in terms of sustainability of change. So as I said at the beginning, as we know, people in relation to making a change happen are the greatest factor, are the greatest of importance. And so the maximum scores for each of the factors within the sustainability model echo that. Then if we have a look at the process factors, for example, here, what you've got is each of the 4 green bars are the maximum possible scores that you can score for each of those factors. So what it shows here is, for example, the factor of credibility of evidence. So evidence relating to why you should change, why there's benefits of making that change is the most important of the process factors. But even that's only got a maximum score of 9. Whereas some of the staff factors have got a much greater maximum score, so a much greater possibility in terms of impacting positively that sustainability of change. So here, credibility of the evidence is the highest, closely followed by benefits beyond helping patients, and then a little bit lower in terms of those maximum possible scores is the adaptability, which we just looked at in terms of the scoring grid, and then close behind it is the effectiveness of the system to monitor progress. So really interesting here is that that credibility of evidence around the kind of process is really important. So for this, it's thinking about what's your storytelling, who are the leaders in terms of that change around why are we delivering a change, how does the process relate to that, why is it important to do something differently. And so that's where you can then start thinking about who are those important people to be able to link in to embed that the process part of that change. When might you think about looking at sustainability? So when might you think about actually running through this sustainability model? Well, often sustainability can be thought about, can be considered at the point at which we change from the delivery of the change into passing it over into the teams that are going to deliver it on a day-to-day basis. However, it's really important to think about how do we make sure that that change will be embedded and that change will have that longevity right at the beginning when you're thinking about what do you include in the project, what do you focus the project on, and what do you not include in the project. Because some of the things in terms of that longer term infrastructure or that longer term environment that needs to be in place to make sure that that change actually does stay the long distance is something that may be more culturally it might be more something that you need to focus on culturally, and therefore, as we know, that can take a bit longer to embed and to make the changes over time. You also think about when you're implementing the changes. So at certain kind of points, you might stop and just check in and say, have we got everything we need in place to make sure that this change will see that long distance out and that we've got that repeatability, as people had highlighted in the Menti at the beginning. And then it's also after that end of that formal project point about the time that we make it part of people's day-to-day practice. There's also that monitoring. So once that formal project team and support is then to one side and is moved on to to look at something else, actually it's important to still think about the monitoring of that change to make sure everything is in place as needed, because sometimes, as we know, other changes can inadvertently cause consequences to that original change, which means that then that change is no longer sustainable. So it's over to you. Why don't you go and have a look at the sustainability model yourself? So we're going to post a link in the chat, and the link is to the QSA pages, the Quality Service and Improvement Redesign and Practitioner course pages, and where we have multitudes of kind of models and tools, some of which I know you'll cover in later sessions. So if you can just have a look at the sustainability model. If you can have a look as well at purely the staff factors, so as I say, the areas where we've got the greatest weighting in terms of people, so just have a look at the staff factors. For those of you who have used the model before, I would urge you to have a look at the staff factors, staff factors, and not just think about where you are now currently and what's in place currently, but also think about where you were 3 months ago. And this can be a project that you're involved in at the moment, a project that's just starting out, a project that maybe you're leading. So just think about something as an example. So those of you who haven't used it before, just have a look at the 4 staff factors and choose the A, B, C or D statements that you've got, and then look at how you transfer the scoring and stop at that point. Lisa, is there anything else you wanted to add in terms of keeping an eye on timing?
Yeah, thank you, Claire. So we are going to just give you 10 minutes to have a look at this on your own time now, guys. So there's a session here, sort of 10 minutes that we're allocating for you to have a look. If any of you have got any questions, we are here in the background. So if you have a look at it and there's something that's not quite making sense, either pop the question into the chat box or do sort of bring yourself back into the main room and pop your hand up, and we'll try and help if you can, because this is just a practical opportunity for you to just have a quick look at it and have a little bit of a practice while you've got the people that know about this tool sort of readily available to ask any questions of. But we are just going to go quiet now for about 10 minutes, guys. So sort of kicking off again at 22. So please do take that time just to have a look through the tool and the link that Kate's popped in the chat there. But as I say, if anybody has got any questions, feel free to either pop them in the chat or pop your hand up, and I am sure Claire will be more than happy to answer any questions. So we'll be ready to go again, 10 minutes time, back at 22. Thank you. Okay, guys, it's 22. We haven't had any questions come through in the chat or any hands up, so I'm going to work on the premise that it's either all very straightforward or you just want to take a little bit more time to ingest what the learning is. So if you do have any questions, there's another short section that Claire will be presenting now. By all means, pop your questions into the chat box because we have got a little bit of time assigned towards the back end of the presentation to pick up any questions. But for now, Claire, back over to you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lisa. So let's have a look at the scoring and what we do next. So for my example, because you can see I've completed one here, for my example, I have used the merger of several same-day urgent care services across different community geographies. And this is a piece of work that I led on a couple of years ago when we were bringing together community teams across Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire in the southwest. So here, the first factor here of staff involvement and training, then I'd selected statement B because people have been involved from the beginning of the process, but at the point that I'd scored this, then we had not delivered training in different ways of working at that point. So things like different standard operational procedures, being able to bring those together, those are being worked on alongside as part of the change process. So I'd selected statement B for this. In terms of staff behaviours towards sustaining the change, what I noticed was that although we had lots of ideas coming in from staff as things to try out, what was happening within the organisation was that people were having to get sign-off at lots of different levels to actually undertake really small tests of change, so to be able to try out those new ideas. So that's why I've chosen B for the staff behaviours here. And then D, in terms of senior leadership engagement support, whilst the senior leadership were involved in the consultation over any role changes, they were involved in that part of this merging of the community teams. What they weren't involved in was the operational changes that resulted from those. So in terms of those more task-based changes, so we needed more visibility as a result of that. So I chose the lowest statement there, D, for that. And then the clinical leadership factor, and actually it's really worth noting that in terms of the staff or people factors, the clinical leadership point in some changes can relate to the clinical leadership, but it can also relate to other technical professional leadership. So here it might be if you're changing, for example, electronic patient record system, then it might be that you refer to some of the technical teams that sit behind that change in terms of the professional leadership engagement support here. So you've got some flexibility in terms of the way that you use the model depending on the change and the stakeholders and the partners involved in that change. So here, in terms of my example of merging those same-day urgent care teams, then the clinical leadership engagement was there, but it wasn't visible as part of the process. So in terms of actually sustaining that change, the kind of the approval and the sign-off from those clinical leaders wasn't visible in the way that we needed it to be to then actually engage with the teams and support and reassure the teams that this change was seen by the wider organisation as well. So if we move from then scoring each of those into what that means in terms of our overall sustainability, for here, going from left to right, we've got staff involvement first. So I'd selected statement B. So statement B then transfers into a numerical score of 6.3, which you can see there in the circle. Then staff behaviours towards sustaining change. Again, I'd chosen statement B. So statement B is score of 5.1. Then that goes in that circle. And then as it goes across the different factors there. So you'll see as part of your booklet, you've got that master scoring sheet, which goes through each of the 3 themes and the 10 factors. So you can score each of them and translate that into a numerical value. So for my example, What that looks like is on those maximum bars, and remember those are the maximum scores, the coloured bars. So the staff involvement, so that's top factor. So the maximum score there can be 11.5, but mine was scored at around a kind of 6.5. So you can see that there is a little bit of difference between then where my score is and where the potential of the staff involvement could be in terms of sustaining change. The staff behaviours one, mine had scored around a 5. The maximum was 11. So again, there's a little bit kind of a difference there in terms of potential. But the greatest potential in terms of my example was around the senior leadership engagement. Well, that's not hard considering I'd scored it on the lowest statement, so statement D, and then that resulted in a 0 score. So that's the greatest difference and greatest area of potential. And then you've got second to that is clinical leadership engagement. So the difference between where that crosses in terms of the scoring, so around kind of 5.5, to where the maximum is in terms of the maximum mark of 15, that's the second greatest part. And I think this is again where the sustainability model for all of yourselves as people who've got oversight of change programs and work, this can be just really helpful to think about, well, where are you going to focus your limited resource and time? If you can see that there is an area which has got the greatest potential, you know that then you can focus on your next stage of planning and your next stage of implementation on that particular area, and you've got a very immediate way of being able to prioritize where you want to focus. And so I think sometimes having that ability as leaders, as people who oversee change, then to be able to translate it straight away into priority areas can be so helpful. Another way of displaying the information, which some people might prefer, and we'll send you in the resource pack afterwards, an Excel spreadsheet where you can then input the figures, which will then generate either the bar chart or what's called a radar or spider chart. And so what we've got here is the 10 factors around the outside, and so they form the kind of prongs of the radar chart. And then the outer line, so the green line here, is the maximum scores, and then your scores are the actual scores, or the purple scores, and then it's the biggest difference between those. So here you can see where there is greatest areas difference, and sometimes people find that a little bit easier in terms of seeing the differences and areas to be able to prioritize on. So we thought we'd give you that as another way of analysing your results. So what does the overall score tell you? You can see in your booklets that whilst you've got each of the factors, you can actually add them up overall. This is a very, very much a guidance in terms of that overall score. And it is, again, just helpful in terms of when you are, particularly as leaders, being kind of short of time, then you can actually have a look at that overall score. And if you score below 35 in terms of where your project or change idea is at that point in time, no matter what planning might be in place, just think about what are the kind of sustainability elements that might be missing from that plan, or that you might need to add into that plan. Below 45, there might be a couple of areas you might want to focus on. Above 55, though, you can be optimistic that the majority of things seem to be in place that will lend themselves to be really good in terms of having that sustainability and ensuring that repeatability and that longevity of that change. So these aren't be all end all kind of scores. These are not kind of thresholds for a kind of go no go on a kind of project. These are very much guides to actually either kind of pause and stop, or to think about something differently. So it just gives you a way of thinking about things. So if you've got some gaps in the scores, what are the things that you can think about? These are the things that might help. For those of you who are new to the sustainability model, just use what the kind of the factors descriptions are within each of those grids. They, I think, are really helpful in being quite specific about what you might need to think about. So have a read through of those. For those that have maybe used it before, or for those that when you get a little bit more familiar, think about your partnership mapping. So what we might refer to as well as stakeholder mapping. Think about those who are involved and those you might want to involve to better help you with some of those areas where you've got the greatest potential. Think about what Lee talked about in terms of the STAR leadership model factors. We are sharing the resources, as we say, afterwards, or you can Google STAR model, and you can look on the CUSA pages for STAR model as well. Think about those in terms of what are the factors that then might also support the changes that you can make in terms of the sustainability scoring. And ask, absolutely, add on, whether it's like 15 seconds, 30 seconds to other conversations that you might have as part of your day. Ask your partners who you are working with to deliver this change. Obviously prioritise the kind of patients and their carers and your staff, but ask people, and it doesn't have to be, that ask doesn't have to be a 2-hour workshop. It can be a kind of a minute ask on the end of other conversation. It can be kind of, a 30-second ask on the end of an email. So think about the incremental ways that you can then go and look at it. It doesn't have to be big chunks of time in terms of using your energy in that particular way. So I hope that is helpful in terms of giving you an idea of what you can use for particular oversight. I've seen a couple of people who've mentioned that it's a tool that they might think about using. I'd be really interested to hear about those of you who might have used it before and how you found that that's helpful. So please do add that in the chat either now or at the end, or give us feedback. And if there are any questions, do let us know. But I thought I'd leave on this particular point, which is about sometimes when you have oversight of a change project or a change idea, you can feel that sometimes going in those kind of incremental stages and the stop-start stages can feel pretty useless to start off with, but it's a real reminder to keep going, because little and often can often then build a much stronger, cohesive piece of work that then is embedded for the long term. Thanks very much for your time today, and if you've got any questions, please do add them to the chat or let us know.
That's great. Thank you so much, Claire. That's been a really interesting session, and I know for people who have perhaps not had an opportunity to see or use the sustainability tool and the model and approach before, that's probably been an awful lot of information that we've given you today. So do appreciate that there's a need to maybe just go away and reflect on some of what's been shared. But I think we've possibly got one question in the chat, Angela. Do you want to raise that one with us?
How often during the process should you recalculate or revisit the scoring relating to how the programme is developing?
It's a good question. So because of the fact that this is scalable, so whether it is something that you're doing quite on a small test of change, or it's something that you're doing over kind of overall programme, I would say there's probably within kind of like maybe larger projects or kind of programmes, so where it isn't just about maybe a kind of day-to-day thinking about a change. So there's probably about 4 points that I'd say that would be useful to think about it at. Right at the beginning, in terms of your overall planning and your scoping in terms of what's in and out of scope. So at that, incorporate it into that planning phase and thinking about what's the problem that you're trying to solve, what you're trying to change and why, and so therefore what might you need in place at that point. And then 2 points throughout the implementation, just to kind of check in. And then the 4th point, at that point where you're planning to then move it across into that business as usual phase. So at the point where the temporary project infrastructure that you have in place to support the implementation is planning to then be directed elsewhere. So where it's then going to be removed away from the kind of change, I'd check in at that point. But there might be points at which you think, something is slightly out here, or I can't quite get a handle on why this change isn't, the ownership of this change isn't being picked up in the way that we think it should be, or why aren't people engaging with it? There might be one of those kind of gut feelings that you have, at which point you might want to look at that. And just following on that, there's another question there about who should ideally fill it out. So yeah, absolutely, there will be some different kind of schools out there. So what I've done, and what I've seen work well in practice before, is as those who are involved in the project on a day-to-day basis, all of you score together. So sometimes it might be that as a kind of individual, you might think, what's out of kilter here? What do I need to think about? In which case you might score it yourself, just as a way of working through and giving yourself some prompts of areas to think about. You might have a think about that separately. But at those kind of check-in points, I would suggest that there were, 3 or 4 people at least that actually come together from different perspectives. So it might be lead, it might be, so in terms of the change lead, it might be in terms of the people that are receiving the change, are going to be impacted by the change, they might score it. Those that are then going to be working to deliver that change, or those that might be using the changed way of being on a day-to-day basis, have those think about those different perspectives, because actually, as you say, Jack, then people will have the different perspectives, so it's helpful to think about that rounded view. But sometimes it is just that gut feeling of something's off here. I want to be able to think about, what are the questions I need to ask, or which area do I need to delve more deeply into.
Brilliant, thank you, Claire. Right, okay, so I think we're nearly at the end of the session for everybody today. I just want to take this opportunity to thank the speakers for the session that's been delivered today, and I hope you've all found something that you'll be able to take away and use as you embark on your improvement journey. I'd also like to thank all of you for making the time to attend today. It's been great to have some familiar faces and names in the chat from last week as well, and we look forward to seeing some of you again next week for Core Learning Event 3. If you haven't done so already, please can I ask you to complete the rest of the Menti survey? Sawa has just popped the link back in the chat there. Your feedback is really important, and we certainly took feedback from last week and tweaked some of how we've delivered this week. So it is really important that we hear from you guys, because you're on the receiving end of this, and if we're not hitting the mark with you, then we need to make the changes accordingly. So we're going to end today on a little video, and some of you may have seen this before. It is an oldie, but I think it's a goodie video. And it's just a little message really to say that leadership is not about being the one in charge or the one up front and centre all of the time. The role of the first follower is really important, and at times it can be even more important than being that person that's up front and centre. So remember, as you're watching this video, if in the future you do see a lone nut making a lot of sense out there, go and join that party and get a momentum going. So enjoy the video. We'll see you all again soon. And Kate, if you could press play, that'd be great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. See you all again soon.